Last week's episode of the podcast almost didn't go live. As you might know, I tend to send them out on a Saturday, and then I write to all of the beautiful souls that are part of my gorgeous little community on a Sunday and share some reflections about the podcast. Last weekend, I was rushing to get the podcast live because I only had a very short amount of time before having to go into hospital and have some emergency surgery. Welcome to the Henny Flynn podcast, the space for deepening self-awareness with profound self-compassion. I'm Henny. I write, coach and speak about how exploring our inner world can transform how we experience our outer world, all founded on a bedrock of self-love. Settle in and listen and see where the episode takes you. Now that sounds incredibly dramatic, and I have to say it felt very dramatic in the moment, but everything was okay. I am okay. We are okay. But the experience of it has been enlightening, as these things often are. And so today I just thought I would talk about some of the themes that came up for me as I noticed what was happening. One of the themes was the show must go on. And of course, there I was on the Saturday morning, knowing I was about to go into hospital to have a general anaesthetic. And still, the principle of I need to get the podcast published was strong for me. Now, I looked at that thought, I examined that thought, and I had a choice. I could easily have not sent the episode live, or I could use the hour that I was just waiting before having to leave for the hospital and do something useful with it. And so I chose to do that. Now, I'm really mindful, was that an old pattern playing out? Or was that a mindful, kindful decision, choice that I made that ultimately benefited me because it meant I didn't have to do it this week? I'm glad I did it. And also it was a wonderful thing to be able to share that conversation that Kate Adams and I had last week about the new book, In the Flow. And it felt, in the moment, it felt like the right thing to do. The reason for sharing this is I think often we encounter these old patterns of behaviour. And the sort of instinct can be, oh, we mustn't do that because that's the old way of behaving. Rather than seeing it with awareness and making the choice from a different place from the place that we might have made it in the past. And that's my own reflection. And I just wondered whether that's something that resonates with you as well. You know, if you're aware that there are patterns of behaviour, ways of thinking, ways of behaving that you recognise might not always serve you, and at the same time recognise have served you well in the past. And I suppose there's that kind of terrible phrase, you know, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. What we don't want to do is sort of do this kind of wholesale, artificial, transformative shift within ourselves that is not true to who we actually are. What we're really looking to do is to deepen our awareness of what is driving our behaviour, what's driving the motivations behind why we're behaving in a certain way. Now, it might be, of course, that I'm pulling the wool over my own eyes, and actually me, coming up here to the stable on Saturday morning and, sending the podcast out live was a brilliant example of an old pattern of behavior just playing out with a sort of a different hat on its head and a funny sort of, false nose. Or I could be right that what was actually going on for me was something that was more conscious, more aware. And, I'm open to it being either, because I think one of the things about shifting patterns of behavior is kind of ever deepening this awareness and not finding ourselves sort of stuck in a certain fixed belief or certain fixed way of being or seeing something. What else does it show me? The other thing was I was in quite a lot of pain after the operation, and it reminded me of how hard I can find it to give in to pain in that way. And I think that's something that many of us share. We might have again, it's back to this the show must go on story for me, but for many of us we have this sense of we have to be stoic, we mustn't complain, we need to grit our teeth and bear things. And resilience is important, of course. It's important that we learn ways of being and ways of responding to the world that mean that we are able to hold ourselves steady even in the face of really difficult, challenging circumstances. And also, it's important that resilience doesn't get muddled up with foolhardiness. I've talked about this before on the podcast, that we take these moments where something, stares at us right in the face and see, okay, well, what can I learn from this experience? And one of my endless learnings, I think, is that it is important to rest when we are healing. And it sounds so obvious, doesn't it? And you might think, doesn't she know that? Isn't this something she talks about all the time? But the reality is that when we're faced with something, it can, activate old patterns of behavior. And so noticing that becomes the lesson, that becomes the beauty within the pain. And it's a bit like, actually, as I'm just saying this, it feels a little bit like the guidance that it's not when we meditate that we get the benefit, but it's because we meditate that we get the benefit of meditation. And in the same way, something that feels like there's a thread here with this experience of using our awareness. It's having these moments of awareness that really enable us to grow. It's not necessarily being in the moment of awareness that brings us the growth, but it's the awareness of the awareness. I really hope that makes sense in some way. And so I've been really mindful of how I am accommodating the pain, and also noticing, what that has done to my mood, to my energy levels, to the way that I'm responding to other things. And, and I sort of say, with like wholehearted gratitude, like how grateful I am now that the pain is largely gone, and I'm feeling much more myself, buoyant, energized, present, grounded, all of those things that I feel are really kind of how I want to be feeling. But the feeling, the thought, the insight that comes from that is how quick it is, how quick we can be to forget when something was hard and to sort of swiftly move on from it and go like, oh, yeah, that was tricky. But, hey, I'm fine now. So that's enough. I don't need to think about it anymore. And actually, my personal reflection is I think there is richness in what I have just been through, both on a very personal level about those two areas that I've just shared, but also as a reminder to feel that deep, profound sense of compassion for others. Because, of course, for me, this was a short-lived, sudden thing. It's gone. It's dealt with. I'm healing well. But it has really opened my eyes again, in a more kind of nuanced way, perhaps, to things that I see are happening around me, both to people that I love and people who are my fellow humans on the planet. And I just wondered how, what your reflections are about that. What happens when we experience something which is challenging? How do we hold that experience, not in a way that we're clinging to it and feeling, like we're sort of keep kind of dragging ourselves back down into the pain of it, but that we're able to observe it with compassion and curiosity, the stance of the compassionate observer, and look upon it and see, well, what here is there to teach me? And maybe the simplicity is to be with what we're feeling, to allow it, and not to abandon ourselves when things feel hard, and not to abandon ourselves in a desire to make things feel good. I think that's it. I think that's all I want to say. It's a really short one, and I recognise it was a bit of a download from me. No notes, so I really don't know whether this made sense or was a bit of I don't know, sort of self-centered, reflective, sort of 12, 15 minutes, whatever it is. Self-centered reflection rather. But then, hey, that's what all reflection is, isn't it? Really, it's about centering in upon ourselves and seeing, well, what feels important here. And my hope, as ever, is that maybe there was something in what I've just shared that resonates with you in some way. Maybe something about what I've just shared feels challenging, actually, frustrating, complex, whatever it might be. Notice, well, maybe it was boring, whatever it was, whatever emotion, sensation was activated, notice it with love and be with that. Okay, my darlings. All right, I send you a hug and a wave.